Welcome to our last section of Chapter 5, Section 8. Make sure that, there we go. Now I can see all of it. And what we're going to be learning today is the zero product property. You probably remember this from Algebra 2. Sometimes I call it the ZPP. But what it's saying is, if you have a product of two numbers, the only way for that product to equal 0 is if one of those two numbers is equal to 0. For instance, if x plus 8 is equal to 0, I don't care what this other quantity is over here, because 0 times anything is 0. So if you subtract 8 over, you get negative 8. Now that's not the only possibility, because the right side could have equaled 0, because if the right side equals 0, anything times 0 is 0. Well, there you add 5 to the right side, and that's why your answers are always the opposite of the factors. So that's why we practiced over and over again factoring things. So the way you factor this is doing 3 times negative 8. Okay, that's negative 24. And then factors of negative 24, that had to be 10, would be 12 minus 2. So then you can go through the process of 3x squared plus 12x. How about this? I'll do the other one instead. Minus 2x plus 12x minus 8. So then I can group. I get x for my first term, 3x minus 2. And greatest common factor of the last two is 4. And again, 3x minus 2. So then the 3x minus 2 can be put together, and x plus 4 can be put together. So then you identify where your product is, right here. Either the left side could equal 0, because if the left side equals 0, I don't care about the right side, because 0 times anything is 0. And likewise, x plus 4 could be 0, because anything times 0 equals 0. And it's easy math. You add 2 over, divide by 3. And then this one, you just subtract 4 over. So our two answers are 2/3 and negative 4. And some of you probably remember just doing the opposite of the previous term. Now that only works when the product is equal to 0. Notice we don't have that here. So distribute that x in there. And I'm also going to add 8 to the left side, so now it does equal 0. And again, you can go through your process of 3 times 8, that's 24. And again, it's 12 and 2, but it factors completely different. 3x squared plus 12x plus 2x plus 8. So group the first two things, and you get 3x, x plus 4. Group the last two things, you get 2 and x plus 4. So the x plus 4 can be joined together, and then 3x plus 2 as your leftovers can be joined together. And I'm going to have to write it over here as your final two answers are the opposite. So negative 4. And subtract 2 and divide by 3. I know I skipped a step there, but I'm counting on you remembering from last year how to solve that last part. All right. This next one, kind of complicated, but really not, because I'm going to just simplify. 8 times 3 is 24, but add 4 to that, and we're at 28. And on this side, we have negative 8x squared. That'd be minus 24x. And then at plus 19 at the end. Again, you can't do the zero product property until it equals 0. So let's add 8x squared to the left side. Let's add 24x to the left side. Let's subtract 19 to the left side. Well, now what we have is a special product. And if you don't recognize it, that's fine. You can work through it every other way. Is 4x plus 3. And instead of writing 4x plus 3 twice, I can write it once squared. Now, technically, there are still two answers. It's just that negative 3/4 happens twice. I know I did that one really fast, so feel free to pause, work through it, and if you still have a question, please email me or bring it to class. If I were doing exercise 5, I would get rid of the dividing by 2 by timesing everything by 2. And then I would also subtract 15x to the left side, and then subtract 2 to the left side, because again, I have to double everything in order to get rid of that. So now I can work through this. 8 times negative 2 is negative 16, and 1 minus 16 would give me that value, would give me negative 15. So then I can work it out. Again, I would probably write the minus 16x first. You don't have to do it my way. We can group. So 8x, x minus 2, plus 1, x minus 2. So you can write x minus 2 first, 8x plus 1. And we can finish this by finding where your product is. Product's right here, so the left has to equal 0. The x must be 2 to get the left side to equal 0. And x must equal negative 1/8 in order to get the right side to equal 0. So there's those two answers. And then the third one, or exercise 6, I would do two things as well. First of all, I notice there's an x in all of those, so I could factor out an x. And I'm also going to subtract 2x squared to the left side, and I'm going to subtract the 3 to the left side. But again, notice I factor out that x. So factors of 3 that add to be negative 2 has to be negative 3 plus 1. So I have x, x minus 3, x plus 1. Well, this is the first time that we now have two products. There's a product right here, there's a product right here. So that means that if x is 0 here, I don't care about these other two things, because 0 times anything is still 0. And then what about this one? Well, if this is 0, so x must be 3. 3 times 0 times 4 is still 0. Same thing with this one. So now we have 3 answers. So it's not really a big deal if we have more than one product. Just set every piece equal to 0. And again, feel free to pause before I move on to the next page. All right. So here's another one that would probably be in our interest to get things on the same side. So I'm looking at x cubed. I don't know if I should have 2x squared in front of that, but I'm going to leave it there. Minus 9x, and then minus 18. So I'm looking at my factor by grouping. Factor out an x squared, x plus 2. You can factor out a negative 9. It's also x plus 2. So my product here could be x plus 2, and then x squared minus 9. But notice on that, so we do have the x equals negative 2 as a possible answer, but also x squared minus 9 could equal 0. So if I add 9 over and then square root it, I get two answers. Please remember, when you square root, you get a positive and a negative answer. If you don't like my explanation there, what I could have done as well is I could have rewritten x squared minus 9 as your difference of squares. X plus 3, x minus 3, which we did in section 7. So that's another reason why we have a positive and a negative answer. And don't forget about that one either. So here's another problem where they're just getting you to practice the same thing. Now, if it's returning to the ground, then the height is 0. So don't let the directions confuse you. Yes, it's a word problem, but it's basically saying, hey, can you factor out a t in the problem and negative, 96 divided by 16 is 6. So you're left with t minus 6 is equal to 0. Now this t does equal 0, but it's just saying like, hey, when we launched at time 0, it was on the ground, which is true. It was. The rocket was launched from the ground. But then this t equaling 6 is when it comes back to Earth. So you're doing more of the same thing. And I'm well aware that I'm going fast through these problems, but I have confidence that you are capable of doing this. The main thing with the next one is if we have a right triangle, that means that we can follow the Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. The difference, though, is that there are consecutive integers. So, even integers. I guess I should have mentioned that. So there's at least one answer that works. And the reason why we have to consider the even integers might help us. So let's say we are just going to call one side x. Well, the consecutive even integer has to be 2 more than that. If you're confused, think about how even numbers are 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. What's separating each number is adding 2 to it, which means that the hypotenuse has to be the largest side, so it has to be x plus 4. So if I were doing this problem then, how do we write it as x squared plus x plus 2 squared is equal to x plus 4 squared. So I would simplify before doing anything else. That this would be x squared plus 4x plus 4. And on the right side, you have x squared plus 8x plus 16. And then how about this? Let's just combine like terms. X squared plus x squared is 2x squared. So if I were to subtract terms over, 2x squared minus 1x squared is 1x squared. 4x minus 8x is negative 4x. And 4 minus 16 is negative 12. It's equal to 0. So now factors of negative 12, let's just go down here, would be, let's see, 6 and 2. It has to be negative 6 and positive 2. So we're looking at factored out to be x minus 6, x plus 2. So our answers would be x has to be 6 and x equals negative 2. Now the issue is can you ever have a side length that is negative 2 in length? No. So this is impossible. So what's our final answer is if x is 6, then this length has to be 2 more than 6, so 8. And then the hypotenuse has to be 4 more than 6. And you can double check, but 6, 8, 10 is a common Pythagorean triple that you're probably familiar with. Now, I don't have my book open, but I would encourage you to practice matching each function with its graph on page 391. Don't forget about graphing calculators, and you already know my friend Desmos.com will also help you investigate that. Otherwise, you have enough information to start your homework right here, as well as an opportunity to bring your questions to class or in a Google Meet. Please reach out to me if you have issues.